Pro Tools Edit Window Overview. I'm going to run through an overview of all the tools in the Edit window. In the top left-hand side, we have what are called Edit modes. We have Shuffle, Spot, Slip, and Grid. These buttons control how clips interact with the timeline. We're generally going to use the grid. What that means is wherever you place a clip, it will always place it specifically within the grid that's set. Sometimes you would use a slip option, and that means you can actually slide a clip within a frame, not just on the frame. You see, I can slide it wherever. Here's a frame mark. Here's a frame mark, so I can slide it wherever. But if I'm in grid and I move it, it's always going to snap directly to a frame mark. Moving right in our toolbar, we have our zoom control, and that's these two arrows, and that allows us to zoom in and zoom out. If you click and drag, you can drag zoom and drag zoom out. You can control the height of the waveforms, and this is just how they appear. It doesn't affect the volume. It just allows you to see more or less height to the waveform. This is for MIDI notes, which isn't something we're going to be using, so we can ignore this. And below the zoom tool is a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are zoom amounts, and you can choose these zoom amounts by clicking on them. If you want to make new settings for these zoom keys, if you hold down the command key, that will actually set your current zoom to that number. These numbers also correspond to the numbers on your keyboard. As we move over, you're going to see the tools. We have the magnifying glass tool, which allows us to zoom in. Or if you hold down the option key, zoom out. And the trimmer key, which allows you to trim a clip in or out. The selector key, which allows you to select part of a clip. The hand tool, which allows you to click and drag a clip. The audition tool, which will bring up a little speaker, which will allow you to click and drag and hear what's on the clip. Finally, the pencil tool, which you can only use when you're very much zoomed in, and this allows you to redraw waveforms if you need to clean up a waveform if there's a click or some sound you want to get rid of. We're mainly going to be using these three tools here, and to make it easier, I'm going to talk about the Smart tool. By clicking this little line which covers these three tools, and it allows you to access all of these three tools without having to go and individually click them. It all depends on where you are in your timeline. For instance, if I'm in the center of the timeline, at the beginning or end of a clip, it becomes the trimmer tool. If I'm in the center of a clip, it becomes the cursor tool, so I could click, drag, select. If I'm in the bottom of a clip, it becomes the hand, so I can drag it. So it allows you to access these three tools. It also allows you to create a fade. If I hover in the top corner of a clip at the beginning or at the end, I can click and drag an audio fade, so the audio will fade in volume and fade out in volume. If I select and hit the delete key, I can delete fades. Moving over, we have our main timeline. And if you click on this little drop down arrow here, it's going to allow you to choose the type of counter you want. We're going to choose timecode because generally we work in timecode. Next to that, you'll see you have start, end, and length. And this allows you to see, if you make a selection, what your start time is, what your end time is, and what the length of that selection is. Moving again to the right, we see a grid amount, and this allows you to determine the increment these grids are down here. So because we're working with a film medium, we're always going to choose frames. If you need to go smaller, you can go to half frame, quarter frame, and subframe, but as a general rule, you want to leave it on frames. If you want to turn these grid marks off, deselect this little grid light, you'll notice the marks disappear. Below grid is nudge. Nudge determines if we move a clip or move the cursor, how much that's going to nudge. And we'll generally leave that on one frame. So that way I can move the cursor one frame at a time, or I can select a clip and move that one frame at a time. The two keys that you use to nudge are the comma key and the period key. That will nudge a clip or nudge the cursor forward or backwards. Next to the grid and nudge is the transport control, which allows you to start, stop a clip, put Pro Tools into record. You have fast forward, jump to the end, jump to the beginning. If for some reason you don't see these tools here, and sometimes you'll open up Pro Tools and you won't see the transport or any of these other tools, you would go to this arrow in the top right hand side, which would allow you to turn certain of these tools on and off. So if you don't see the transport control, you just go to the top right and click this drop down menu. And moving down, we have the clips window, and in the upper right hand side of the clips window, you're going to see this drop down menu, which allows you to select some different parameters and operations regarding clips. You can hide or reveal the clips window by clicking on this little arrow with a line. In the center bottom half of the screen is the timeline where your audio tracks appear. Right now we have one audio track. However, I'm going to create some more just so you can see how they populate this window. I'll create seven more mono audio tracks. Click create and you'll see we have 8 audio tracks to work with. You can resize the audio tracks in a couple of ways. You can just click on this little ruler here and choose from a size, or you can click in between 2 tracks and drag. If you want to affect all the tracks uniformly, hold down the option key, drag tracks larger or smaller, and the option key also works with the ruler. Moving over to the left, we have tracks and groups view. Groups allow you to group multiple tracks so they function uniformly. All Pro Tools sessions have a default all group. You want to be careful to make sure that this all group isn't selected here. You notice if it is selected, if I click this, which is a mute button on a track, it mutes all the tracks. If I resize a track, it resizes all the tracks, and that's because the group all is selected. So make sure that's not selected. However, you would select the all group if you did want to have all the tracks perform the same function. Looking above the groups window, you see the tracks window. You'll see each track displayed here. You can hide tracks by clicking on these little dots here, and that will hide the tracks. Not from playing, you'll still hear the tracks, but you just won't see them. It's really helpful when you're using a lot of tracks and you want to declutter your screen. If we move a little bit over to the right, I want to show you these 2 drop-down menus. This first one, this black one here, allows you to add different timelines to your counter. But generally we just want to work with our main ruler only, so we're going to click to main ruler only, and that will just show us our time code ruler. And below that is a white drop-down menu, and that opens the edit window columns. So right now we're seeing just the main columns, but if we want to see other ones, we can turn on I/O, which shows us the input and outputs for each track. We could turn on inserts and a whole other range. We can also go to minimal, which takes us back to the simplest one. If we look right above our time code ruler, you'll see I have 4 buttons illuminated. It's good practice to have these buttons illuminated whenever you're using Pro Tools. These are buttons that just make some operations in Pro Tools a little bit more simple. So that's a general overview of the edit window.